Hello, you're watching World News on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. NATO leaders have agreed to invest 5% of GDP annually in basic defense needs, as well as defense and security-related expenditures by 2035, according to the declaration adopted this afternoon at the NATO summit in The Hague. Now, the events in The Hague are being followed on the ground by our correspondent, Alex Kadir. Hi there, Alex. Good to see you again. So we've just listened to President Donald Trump's press conference summing up the summit. So what's your take on all this and what he said there?
Yeah, Sasha, you're absolutely right. I was in that press conference with the US President just in the last few minutes. From a European perspective, from the perspective of Secretary General Mark Rutte, it went as good as it possibly could have done. We saw President Trump before this meeting quibbling perhaps over the definition of the collective defense of NATO, but Article 5 saying he will give his definition, his understanding of it when he gets here. He was asked exactly that at the press conference, and he said he was moved by the meeting with other leaders, moved by how much, as he describes it, they loved their countries. He said that he came here because it was something he had to do, but he leaves feeling rather differently, moved, as I said, by the commitment of European leaders and elsewhere. A crucial quote from that press conference. It was quite a lengthy press conference. He covered a lot of ground. He was describing NATO, and he said, it's not a rip-off, and we are here to help them protect their countries. That, compared to the kind of words we heard from Donald Trump about the NATO alliance in the past few years, will be seen as progress, will be seen as a clear signal from the United States, from the US president, that the US is committed to NATO. We've seen that in the communique as well, released by NATO leaders, of course, signed by President Trump himself, reiterating the alliance's ironclad commitment to NATO. Ironclad commitment to NATO, and Article 5 signed off by President Trump and the United States. Now, he, of course, had some choice words for Spain, for the Spanish Prime Minister, who said he thinks the current spending on defense, 2%, is sufficient. Donald Trump said, I think Spain, it's terrible what they've done, and he said that he will make them pay double for any trade deal with the United States. But apart from that barb, the US president relatively positive about this meeting of NATO leaders and his time here in The Hague. Also positive about his meeting with President Zelenskyy of Ukraine. That took place just before that press conference. The two spoke for 50 minutes, a lengthy meeting. This is what President Trump had to say about that meeting.
Couldn't have been nicer. I think he'd like to see an end to this. I do. I think what I took from the meeting couldn't have been nicer, actually. But I took from the meeting that he'd like to see it end. I think it's a great time to end it. I'm going to speak to Vladimir Putin and see if we can get it ended. But look, these are brave people. They're fighting these wars all over the place. You know, last week they had, I guess, close, I told you, close to 7,000 young soldiers, Russian and Ukrainian soldiers were killed, 7,000 in 1 week. It's crazy. It's crazy. So I'll be speaking to Putin.
So clearly there, President Trump talking about that meeting with Volodymyr Zelenskyy. A little bit after that, he also said a very clear statement about how he views the end of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He said Vladimir Putin really has to end that war. Again, a narrative shift from a US president who has been warmer with the Russian president than perhaps some on the eastern flank of NATO were comfortable with. At this press conference, he called Vladimir Putin misguided and said that he had to end that war. This statement by Donald Trump will be seen as a positive across the NATO alliance, but particularly on the eastern flank right here in Europe. Back to you, Sasha.
As you said, there are a narrative shift and positive notes from President Trump. Let's see if that commitment does stay. And thanks so much for that update in The Hague, Alex Kadir. Thank you. Now, together, allies have laid foundations for a stronger, fair, and more lethal NATO, said NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, following the leaders' meeting during the NATO summit in The Hague. His comment came following the decision for all NATO members to spend 5% of GDP on defense.
We have just concluded the formal part of the NATO summit in The Hague. Of course, there will be many other meetings later today and this afternoon. And together, allies have laid the foundations for a stronger, fairer and more lethal NATO. NATO leaders agreed on the Hague defense investment plan. And this will fuel a quantum leap in our collective defense. They agreed to boost our defense industries, which will not only increase our security, but will also create jobs. And we have reaffirmed our unwavering support for Ukraine. All of this is crucial. It means that no matter the challenges we face, whether from Russia or terrorism, cyber attacks, sabotage or strategic competition, this alliance is and will remain ready, willing and able to defend every inch of Allied territory.
I'm concluding my mission as president, and I approach this final NATO summit with a sense of calm, knowing that a significant shift has taken place. That's according to the outgoing Polish President Andrzej Duda during the NATO summit in The Hague.
I am concluding my mission as president, and I approach this final NATO summit with a sense of calm, knowing that a significant shift has taken place. To me, it's very apparent. I remember how, during the very first discussions about increasing defense spending, discussions that took place with President Donald Trump during the 2017 NATO summit, when he demanded that everyone contribute 2%, people smiled and nodded, not entirely convinced. That was the mood in the room at the time. Today, there is no doubt. Everyone understands that 2% is not enough and that we must spend more. To ensure our security, we must double our efforts. That's what's already happening, and I hope it will be fully implemented.
Israel, Iran and the U.S. are breathing a collective sigh of relief as a ceasefire between Iran and Israel seems to hold. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu proclaimed the 12-day-long war with Iran a great victory, with an Israeli military spokesperson claiming it has set Iran's nuclear program back by years. U.S. President Donald Trump called the swift end to the war a victory for everybody. Tehran also announced it has triumphed in the conflict, claiming to have put an end to it by penetrating Israeli defenses in retaliation. 610 people in Iran and 28 people in Israel have been killed in the exchange of fire between the two countries. Falcon 9, the SpaceX craft carrying Polish astronaut Sławosz Znański-Wiśniewski, has officially entered Earth's orbit and is currently at an altitude of around 300 kilometers, traveling to dock at the International Space Station. Following liftoff, the Falcon 9 rocket reached a speed of over 27,500 kilometers an hour, marking its maximum velocity. Znański-Wiśniewski briefly addressed the Polish nation with a heartfelt message. The long-delayed mission carries 4 astronauts, including Znański-Wiśniewski, who will become the first Pole aboard the ISS. Over the course of the mission, the Polish astronaut will conduct 13 scientific experiments. According to the latest estimates, the crew is expected to arrive at the station at around 3 p.m. CEST on Thursday. Safety always comes first, stressed Frank de Win, a program manager for the European Space Agency, in an exclusive interview with TVP World. When asked what happens once the astronauts on board SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket reach the ISS.
So it takes about a day to get to the International Space Station, and then after arrival, once they dock, of course there is a welcome by the crew. The first thing is always to see, okay, the safety procedure. Safety always comes first, so they will get a tour from the commander of the International Space Station that explains a little bit all the safety issues that they need to take care of. And then they start working. Sławosz has a very big experimental program, 13 Polish experiments that he will need to execute, also some ESA experiments, Hunor experiments, Indian experiments. So it will be a very, very busy mission for him.
And that's all for this World News Update. We'll have another news bulletin at the top of the hour, so stay tuned right here on TVP World.